Okay, ad lib. Broadcast is live.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Safinah D. Elahi. I'm sorry for the delay. I'll just introduce myself and move on to our guest today. I'm the author of The Unbridled Romance of Love and Pain and the novel Eye on the Prize. I'm also the founder of Reverie Publishers, and which has recently published The Verdict by Osman Haneef. Usman Haneef is a strategy consultant and a tech entrepreneur. He studied creative writing from Stanford University and the Faber Academy. He's also won the Frank Allen Bullock Prize for creative writing at the University of Oxford. The Verdict, available on the Reverie Publishers website and also through Liberty Books, is his first novel, and it centers on a trial dealing with religious persecution. So, Usman, we spoke that we wanted this to be a candid interview. So, I'm going to start slow and hopefully get into the rapid fire and the true and false that I've got ready for you. But Usman, so my first question would to you would be that who was your first reader?
Oh, my first reader. Do you mean like ever as a growing
Yes, yes.
up
Like
or
when you started writing, who did
yeah,
you show the manuscript to? The first person.
so the first so when I first started writing ever as a child, like obviously it would just be sort of, you know, whichever relative was willing to listen or look at it, right? Scribbles I think only parents really have the affection to like look at their children's scribble, and then friends. More recently with the verdict, I'm trying to think. Towards the end, the later drafts. I mean, I would generally show it to my spouse first. But earlier on, when I was first working on it,
You
I
can name her.
oh yeah, Atika. um, but earlier on, honestly, there were just a lot of friends, teachers, different classmates, and things. I mean, the
And you
many.
think the feedback was helpful?
Absolutely, because I think the feedback lets you see how a reader would see the text, right? Oftentimes you're so close to it that you have the entire world and everything already in your head. But oftentimes a reader, it's just good to see how it lands for the reader more than anything else. And then, you can tweak it and show it to somebody else to get a sense of has the tweak sort of uh, done what you wanted to do or not. So I think the power of like a good reader is really something else. I mean, some of the earliest ones were my a writing professor I had many years ago, Susan Kenny, and also a good friend of mine, Helen Brown, who's in the U.S., but a whole bunch of other people as well. And I know that as I name some people, I'm going to leave out many others, and then so
Don't
I'm going
worry
to leave it
about
for
it.
that.
Don't worry about that.
But yeah.
Okay, so Usman, which character, we know that the story revolves around Sana and Sikandar. Which character, it could be a minor character as well. It can't, it doesn't have to be a main character or the
Mhm.
protagonist. Which character did you find the toughest to write?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this before. I think Pir Pia is definitely the hardest character to write because I think his perspective and worldview is so far removed from my own that it really required me um, to read a lot, to engage with very different kinds of people, and to also try to internalize a very different viewpoint, um, just to understand a very different kind of character. And so I think his perspective was probably the hardest to write. But also, I mean, because it was the most challenging, perhaps the most interesting to write as well.
It really was. I mean, reading the script, you can tell the kind of work that goes into somebody who you're so removed from as well. Okay, so what is your writing process? This is a question that you've answered many times. But also, what is the one thing that you struggle with as a writer? I mean, the people who struggle with the ending, the climax, or some people struggle with the background, the backstory of a character. So, what is the one thing for you that you find the hardest when you start writing?
I think I think it's turning off the editor and just writing. To be honest, just writing. Like but a big part of it is also turning off the editor because if I spend a lot of time sort of thinking about what I'm writing on the first draft, I will often not move very far, right? So, and I think, I mean, I'm much better at it now than I used to be. But there's always a sense when you're writing that you're comparing your very early prose to all the writers who've got finished prose out there, right? I mean, you're comparing your first draft to people who've really spent hours and sometimes years perfecting their
And many
prose.
professionals have worked on their script, so the end
Yeah.
result is not really the first thing that they've churned out.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's an element where you're sort of, especially early on, you're sort of doubting it. But now I feel like I've done it enough where I know that but I try not to look at it. I don't edit anything until I've had some time away from it, and so I recognize, or I sort of just say like, okay, this thing isn't working. I'll make a note for myself, and then I'll be like, future me will be so much brighter and more effective. He'll figure it out. But right now, present me is just going to carry on with the story. So I do a lot more of that. But yeah, I think just the simple act of writing and knowing that you're going, not really having is the challenge thing. Getting yourself to sit down and sort of just do it on a daily as a
And the
daily
commitment.
practice.
I mean, the
Yeah.
commitment to it, just day in and day out, just sort of working on the same thing. I always say that writers are most resilient people because you need to read the same text over and over again, up to like probably 100 times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it starts to get a little bit boring for yourself as well because you're reading the same thing over and over again. Okay, so my next question goes to what we were just discussing in the question right before this. How do you concern yourself with political correctness? Sometimes what happens is that when we're writing, we do instill our own ideas on the characters as well. But when readers read it, they actually sometimes cannot make the equation that this is not the writer speaking, this is the writer's character speaking. So, how do you concern yourself with, just being politically correct?
Yeah, so there's an interesting article that, or an interview that they did with Katsuo Shiguru a few weeks ago as part of his promotional tour for his new book. And they asked him, one of the comments he made is that he's concerned that a lot of new writers might be sort of self-censoring or avoiding certain things because they're worried about being, about offending or something along those lines. And honestly, I think, but he also acknowledged that, it's that perhaps they should be more focused on just, if they are writing the other, spending a bit more time to like investigate, understand the other, and then incorporate that into their text. And it's not so much, and as long as you're respectful of the subject matter, I think that's fine. The truth is, I think there's always going to be some people who are, but I don't know if some people are upset, but I don't think you can write while worrying about that there's going to be some sort of backlash because of political correctness. I often think political correctness or worry of political correctness is used as a way of silencing marginalized voices that have been marginalized for so long. I mean, when we're talking about it, it's rarely that someone who's from like the dominant group in a country will be attacked or canceled. It's usually a group that is, stereotyping marginalized groups, or that's usually targeted. So basically, I mean, I feel like it's often the oppressors who are always angry about cancel culture or political correctness, not necessarily the marginalized voices who for a long time have not really had an ability to be heard, who are usually raising those concerns. And I think if you are from the dominant group in whatever context, provided you listen to those voices in a respectful way, you take their feedback as you're writing it, that you should be okay. And maybe you're not, maybe some things come up that isn't quite what you expected or wanted to have come across. And that's okay. I mean, you have to learn and adapt and acknowledge it and move on.
And as long as I think your voice is honest, you're not being dishonest about something, or I mean, obviously outright offensive about a subject as well. There has to be some sort of respect given to, and I guess political correctness is just, I mean, it's a point of view as well, right? Some people will always find something wrong with something.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't try to co-opt something that isn't your own, right? I think that's also often a big issue, right? Like there's a danger that if someone who is, say, completely foreign had written a book, uh, the kind of book I'd written, I think people would have felt a bit like, why, what's going on here? I think it's there is an element of just authenticity that I think people want to say, that if you're promoting it based on a certain aspect of it, just make sure that aspect is true or authentic. Don't try to sugarcoat it, or don't try to like hide who you are in that sense. But again, I know there's also another comment. I mean, you shouldn't take what characters say as the words or the values of the author, right? All my characters are terrible, doing terrible things that I do not condone, like. But so I hope no one views that as I mean, even the protagonist.
So you're just saying that we shouldn't hold it against you.
Yeah, I mean,
if
absolutely.
there's a character you dislike, that's not me.
Yeah, exactly. It's them. Absolutely. I think that's important as well to like state. I mean, uh, yeah. So that's also something that's worth, I think, putting out there.
Definitely. Okay, so just I have a few true and false here. You just have to say one word, true or false.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go and then just kind of hop to the next one.
Okay.
I like my writing career better than my 9 to 9 job.
True.
Okay. If I were to write a first book, I would choose The Verdict all over again.
True. Although I would definitely edit it differently now because I change as a writer all the time. Yeah.
I have used my personal experiences in the book.
True.
I would never write nonfiction.
False.
Writing is a glamorous profession.
I'm laughing because we've definitely had a discussion, and I would definitely say false. Although I know you're trying to project it as very glamorous. I mean, all we do is go to parties and talk about our books. Really, it's...
Okay, so the next one is, any publicity is good publicity.
I mean, I feel like I should say true, but honestly, I'm not so sure about that. But, so yeah.
What is it then?
False. I'll say false.
Okay, so the last one is, publishing should go completely digital.
False.
Okay, so I have, I'm going to give you a word and you can just sort of explain or answer in a sentence. And just like really quickly, that rapid fire that we were talking about.
Okay.
So complete the sentence. Failure for me is...
not writing in a week, let's say.
Okay. My top 3 Pakistani authors are...
Oh, this is unfair. I don't want to do this. I refuse.
Skip.
No. I'm not going to do this. It's too...
We'll skip to the next question.
Yes, please. No. They're lovely. All amazing. Love them all.
Love them all. No shout outs here. Okay, so this is a question that I know that has been asked before, but there's an international debate about it. Do you think that writing can be learned?
So, yeah, I mean, I think we're all naturally human beings. We're all storytellers. I mean, the very fabric of our entire society is based on storytelling, like the rules we follow, the idea of currency, governments, all this other stuff. So I think we probably all have an innate ability to receive and tell stories. And I think that can be developed over time. And that can be developed through not just sort of writing or telling stories, but reading and hearing stories. Now, the question of whether or not that means that, that doesn't mean you have to take like formal classes to actually become a, a decent storyteller. I don't think that's true at all. In fact, I think most most people throughout history have not had sort of like formal, creative writing instruction. But I do think it requires to be an effective sort of writer and author today. You do have to have a sense of storytelling and have read a lot and have an understanding of how what you're doing affects the reader, or maybe not, but just you have an innate talent. But I think it definitely can help you sort of bring out the best from your prose or text. But there's also this, as I said, there's this big thing about like finding a voice. You hear this all the time.
Yeah.
Publishers, agents, everyone is like, I want a new voice. I love the voice of this thing, and for writers, everyone's always like, what do you mean we all have a voice? What are you talking about, right? What is this nebulous voice that is like the basis for every acceptance or rejection or whatever else? And I think in many ways that is that is an attempt to find like what is uniquely unique to that author in terms of how they tell the story. So I think everyone probably brings their own unique way of telling a story to any text. That's not just an imitation of someone you read who you really admire, but is something uniquely your own. And so I think in that sense, you can't teach someone to take on someone else's voice. Like it'll never be as good as the original. So there is an element of that where you can't teach it. And I think that's where people are often, conflicted or something. Your voice is your voice, and you can't really emulate or copy someone else's and have it be effective or ring true. I think that's where
Definitely, I think. But so just taking a question from your comment, has there been, a text that you've sort of read and thought that this is how I want to write? I know that To Kill a Mockingbird is, people have compared your work with it, which is, I think, a huge compliment. It's a classic.
Absolutely.
But is there anything, because when I read, when I read a paragraph and I love it, I think to myself that I want to be able to write like this. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to copy it off, that person's writing, but something that truly has impressed you. It could be obviously any author, any time, and it could be when you were younger as well. But sort of just that moment where you thought that, oh my God, I wish I could write like this person has written this paragraph.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I think what's interesting with those authors, I think, is there's people like Evelyn Waugh, in Brideshead Revisited. I remember there was some passages that just sort of describing places that brought them to life in a way that I never sort of read before. I think sort of when I look at novels as a whole, though, I'm a big admirer of like Katsuo Ishiguro's novels. I mean, just the way they're, and I've talked about this before, but he always has these structures where he creates this whole world, and you think you know what's going on, and then, 2/3 of the novel or something, it just shifts, and you realize everything you know up to that point was a lie or was, misleading in some sense. And it's just really remarkable how he plays with the reader and sort of, it's the sort of and he leaves sort of clues all along the way before the twist happens. But I've always sort of admired his novels for their construction as well. And so I don't think it's, I definitely don't look at these books and think, I'm gonna copy them, whatever. But I think there's so much to be admired, whether it be in the language, in the case of Evelyn Waugh, or just sort of the structure and the way like everything's presented, as it is with Ishiguro. But yeah, those are two of many, many other authors. I feel like I'm always adding more to the list as I go along.
Lovely. Okay, so how do you feel about book to movie adaptations? There any examples where you think that the movie was actually better than the book, or do you think that's not possible? That's a big no for you.
So actually, I think there are cases where they both can be brilliant on their own terms, and there's probably some. I mean, I haven't read the Godfather books, but I've heard that actually the movies might surpass the books. So I don't, for those who are big fans of the books as well, don't come after me. I don't actually know. But there's things like Breakfast at Tiffany's, which was a brilliant book by Truman Capote, or a novella, and then also sort of a classic with a very different sort of um, uh, different sort of plot almost in the movie. There are some issues of representation of certain character, like an Asian character, which is awful today, and I can't imagine it's ever funny. But barring that, the movie is a classic, and it's interesting because I think in order for it to work, you can't just replicate the book, chapter by chapter, page by page, to the screen. That never works. I think the filmmaker has to be willing to say, this is like the essence of the book. How
Yeah.
can we sort of play with it for the new medium that we're sort of presenting it on? Like, I think those are the adaptations which I think are the most effective. The ones that don't just try to like copy everything, but say, how can we actually do this better, or just as well on the screen, or in a different way, or add something different that the book couldn't. So yes, I would say those those are some that like obviously come to mind. I mean, Jurassic Park also which I haven't read the book, unfortunately, but I mean, come on, I remember going to like the cinemas and seeing those dinosaurs the first time and being sort of wowed by it, right? And I'm sure the books were fantastic, but there's something about the scale and spectacle of something like that I think the movie probably also
Did justice.
did justice to it, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm sure there are many more examples, but I definitely think movie adaptations can be great.
definitely. So Usman, what are you currently working on?
Yes, I'm working on a. I always feel nervous about this question a little bit because I feel as soon as you put it out there, people expect it to come out very soon, and I mean, I'm hoping it will, but who
Trust me,
knows how
if a
long it
writer is
will.
asking the question, then
Yeah, yeah.
we
No,
know how long it takes.
yeah, and who knows what it could be by the time I'm done, right? So I'm working on a book that's uh, of a character looking back on his life, but particularly one sort of summer year where he and his friends investigated a murder in Islamabad. Kind of and the idea is to sort of take all the tropes that you usually see in like why mysteries, but make them a lot darker and say, if kids in Islamabad were actually pretending to be Enid Blyton type famous spy things, how would it actually look, and what sort of awful things may transpire, and in that process, how they sort of end up discovering more about themselves and the society they live in. So it's yeah. So we'll see how it comes together, but it's been interesting so far for me writing it. So hopefully people enjoy reading it as well.
Would you, Usman, consider teaching writing at any point? Do you think you'd be a good teacher? Because I know that not everyone can sort of, come down to teaching. If you're a good writer, obviously you can write stuff, but then teaching is completely, a different sort of avenue. Do you think you could give back?
I think I definitely would be open to it and happy to do it. In sort of uh, depend if the right sort of opportunity would ever presented itself. I think it's because I think it's exciting to interesting or fun to teach generally, right? I think it's being able to sort of help writers or help people find their voice. I think is there's nothing quite as exciting, and also I was fortunate enough to have a lot of people you know, read my work and sort of give me sort of, um, I don't know, feedback or support or encouragement,
But I
and
think I
had a lot
think
of good
what's
teachers.
needed here as well is, maybe a good mentorship program, or have established writers sort of, guide and mentor writers who are just beginning their journey. So, this question is sort of just, something that you'd be open to, in terms of helping out new, writers.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah. But I do think it's one of those things where one always has to be careful because, ultimately, um, the writer has to write it. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
you can, and the mentors can sort of read short bits and passages and things like that, and sort of coach or suggest things or like move in certain directions. But at the end of the day, it really has to come down to, I think, the writer. But yeah, absolutely, I think it's important to uh, support and advise and encourage as much as we can, sort of, to help sort of the rising the rising tide of, I guess, Pakistani fiction writers.
And how has the feedback been on the verdict? I mean, I've been reading all good things. How do you feel now that your work is out in the world? That is there more nervousness, or you're sort of, you're taking a step back and said that I've put it out in the world and I'm sort of just, I've done my share, my bit in the
Yeah, no,
writing.
so I mean, a lot of relief and gratitude. I think, those are probably the two biggest feelings. I think relief that it's actually come out, right? Because as you know, it wasn't sort of a very easy journey. I mean, it's a difficult subject, and there was a lot of, I think, concerns around it. So it was a lot of relief that's sort of has come out, and a lot of gratitude for the positive response and support it's received and the love it's received. But at this stage, I'm also thinking a bit like, okay, I've got to make sure I, get to work and finish the second one, right? Like I think there's an element of I need to sort of move on to the next project a little bit. But yeah, relief and gratitude really are the two
And
feelings.
after the first book, do you feel the pressure to produce something as fantastic as your first work? Do you feel the pressure? Do you think that you've sort of packaged that, done with, and then the next work that you do, it could? I mean, because I hear a lot of readers saying that, oh, their first book was really good, but then the second one and the third one didn't really live up to its expectations. So do you feel the pressure? I mean, I know that it's not nowhere close to being at that level right now, but what's your
Yeah.
general like?
I mean, I felt fine until you asked the question.
Sorry.
No, I mean it's I don't I mean the book readers and sort of fans and supporters haven't seen this second book yet, so it's hard to say how they react. But I think you always, as you're writing it, uh, one hopes that it'll. Uh, it's. I also think it's probably unfair to compare two books in some sense because you're trying to do very different things, or one is trying to do very different things with each book and trying to
Yeah,
tell very different
and you're
stories.
not supposed to obviously replicate the entire, the voice or even the narration from the first work. So, I mean, I guess it's a gamble. Once it comes out, you sort of find out what happens and what it's being compared to. So, Usman, lastly, what is your advice to aspiring writers? Should they be looking for publishers in Pakistan? Is Pakistan ready to sort of introduce writers? Where are we headed? Because I know that the verdict was first. It wasn't first published in Pakistan. Where do you think we're going as as a nation in publishing in literature?
Yeah, no, I mean, so we've obviously had many conversations. I think not just you and me, but sort of authors, Pakistani authors, about this topic. So, as you know, with the book ban in India, which means that books published in India can't be sold in Pakistan, I feel like Pakistani authors are going to have a much harder time selling their books to Indian publishers, right? Which is sort of the traditional route that we all took. Publish it in India, have them, exported and distributed in Pakistan, and you'd have both the Indian market, which is very large, and the Pakistani market. And since that's not really an option anymore, there was a big concern that where would sort of Pakistani authors go, and how would their books be read? And I think, yourself with Reverie Publishers, but also people like, like Meher Juka Books, Taibat Ala Books and Authors, but a number of other publishers have emerged that I think offer a lot of support to young authors, but also established authors, and in many ways provide a much even better sort of avenue, I think, than we had in the old days, because you have established links with sort of ecosystem here, and I'll try to build up the ecosystem here. So, I mean, I think for Pakistani authors or writers who are looking to sort of publish their work in Pakistan, I think it's a very exciting time right now, because they actually do have options locally, which will allow their book to get out there and to be read by many different people across sort of the country. So yeah, that's all I'd say to that.
Also, so I know personally that I've been asked so many times that how do we get our book signed by Osman? So would you like to tell the viewers and readers when you're coming to physically sign books for them?
Yeah, so I mean, hopefully I'll be in Pakistan by the end of the year for maybe a wedding or two weddings when wedding season kicks off. So maybe we can try and coordinate that. We're also looking at signing book plates that maybe we could send to people who've already had them, or distribute them somehow, or maybe next set of books that go out can have book plates sort of in them. But yeah, I mean, given it's sad, but because of COVID and everything else, really haven't been able to sort of I think do the kind of tour and sort of have the kind of direct engagement with readers that one would ideally want. But yeah, thank you so much for the interest. It's really touching and really appreciated.
Okay. So can we have some questions from the audience, because I think we were meant to take in some questions. Hello, Safinah and Osman. My question is, what was the challenge? Plot progression or character evolution, or both?
Yeah, so I mean, thank you,
This
Umar.
is
Yeah, thank you, Umar. Appreciate the question. So I think there's, I didn't think when I was writing it, I was sort of, the authors often talk about how their characters lead them a certain way. And I was definitely writing as a discovery writer. That is someone who's not quite sure what the plot is going to be when they start, and they just sort of figure it out as they go around, as the characters are developed and as the characters direct them. So I think the character evolution of figuring out or having them sort of direct the plot was actually very challenging for me in many ways. But after the first draft, or after a couple of drafts and rewrites, that's when I saw, okay, this is the narrative arc that would make sense. This is how I can make the character evolution really stand out. So to answer your question simply, I guess character evolution, I think, was always is the most challenging aspect. But character for me drives plot rather than plot, driving character. So that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, I think that answers it. Thank you, Umar, for your lovely question. Imran Khan says they feel challenged. The dominant group always oppose new ideas or rational approaches. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Muniba Samad says, do you think fiction around the pandemic will become the norm, or is this trend timely?
Yeah, I hope it won't become the norm, to be honest. I also think that a lot of people right now, I mean, if you look at sort of some of the best-selling books right now, sort of abroad or globally, they're oftentimes books that are like comic or have comedic elements in them. And I think that's partially because people are trying to find an escape of some form. So I think actually, books about traveling the world, I mean, or exploring new places might be doing better than sort of pandemic literature. But I do, I mean, so to answer your question, I think it's the ones that are coming out right now that are people are reading are probably just hopefully a short-term trend that we'll all want to forget in a few years.
Hopefully. I mean, I think we've got the Stained Glass Window, which sort of collected stories. It was an interesting read. But I do hope that we can, get over the pandemic soon. Okay,
Yeah.
so Lalaine Fatma Rizvi says, what other genres would you like to explore?
Yeah, I know, and yeah, agreed. Stained glass. No, sorry about the other question. Brilliant collection, but I think that's an exception rather than the norm. What other genres do you like to explore? I'm not. I usually don't try to write to a genre. Like I try to write what they call book club or a hybrid of literary slash commercial. Uh, and I'm not sure I necessarily think that um, the breaking down of genres, whether it be speculative or anything, that is very helpful often. I think it's often used by bookstores or booksellers to sell books rather than anything else. I mean, Ishiguro's latest book has got sort of it's about an artificial intelligence robot, and sort of how they view it. But no one would put him or say he's a speculative fiction author generally, even though much of his work is speculative in nature, right? And so I'm not sure the categories are that helpful.
And also, I feel, the difference between literary and commercial and contemporary and women's fiction, or, I think these categories are, there's a really blurred line between the
Yeah.
many categories that I just mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, why even have women's fiction as a category, right? Like that.
They
I mean,
do, they do. I
like,
mean, when you
it's
search
like,
up the categories, and I'm like, what is women's fiction? What men are not meant to read,
right. It's just,
or chick lit, or whatever they call it. But it does
yeah.
fall under this, I think, contemporary or like a fast-paced genre that can sort of just be amalgamated into one.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that's important to me is just having sort of books that hopefully will be engaging reads, but also thought provoking in some way. So talk about something broader thematically. But otherwise, I could see myself writing in a number of different genres, or what we traditionally sort of say are genres.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we have Anam Azam asking,
Thanks,
reading your
Anand.
book and enjoying it a lot. Nicely written so far. So I think that's a
Thanks.
comment more than a question.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy the rest of it as well. Yes.
Sheroz Mahmood said,
Ah.
who would you be your dream producer director to make a movie adaptation of your books? Okay.
Whoever's watching this right now who wants to do it is welcome to try it.
Just private message.
Yeah, feel free to DM right now. Thank you, Shiroz Iowa, for that question. No, I mean, there's, I'm not, I really appreciate the question, but I mean, there's so many fantastic filmmaker directors. It just seems silly to go there. But thank you for the question. It'll be, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we have Anam Azam again. Did you find it hard to publish a book in Pakistan since there's no straight set for writers to get seen?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, yeah, it was difficult to get published in Pakistan. There was, the challenge was, because it touches upon a very sensitive topic, and the sort of positioning and I guess for it in the Indian market was such that it would have been very difficult for a publisher in Pakistan to sort of just copy paste it and print in Pakistan, and so it required us to sort of consider local rules and regulations a lot, which so, and for a publisher to sort of see the potential, but also recognize and put some time and sort of investment into making sure it sort of navigated the so-called local rules and regulations. And so, I was very fortunate to find Safinah and Reverie Publishers, but that's definitely not that wasn't sort of normal response. I had many publishers who looked at it and said, love it, all our reviews, internal reviews have said great, but really sorry.
The but has to come in.
But yeah, really sorry, you can't. There's so too much going on in terms of the rules and regulations around what you can and cannot say, and we can't sort of take it as is, or we don't know how to take it as is. So with Safinah and Reverie, we had sort of lawyers look at it and sort of highlight flag certain things that needed to be rephrased or potentially removed or changed, and we sort of had a bit of back and forth about, like, was this okay? Can I not change this but remove this?
No, so Anam, basically, if you don't know, I basically founded Reverie Publishers, and we did sort of sit together and edit it with a couple of lawyers. And I think Osman was very sensitive in his writing. You said you're reading it as well. I think you have done justice to the topic, and I think the idea was to start a conversation, and people who've read the book have thought about it, have appreciated the thought behind it. And kudos to Osman for picking up a subject of this propensity, and just being very sensitive around it. It is a fiction, it's a fictitious story, but at the same time it's very real as well. This is something that is happening in Pakistan, and I think that books or any kind of art deals with issues more effectively than just calling out people or just going on the roads and just putting up banners. I think this is a more of an intellectual conversation that one has with the readers and oneself as well. So I think well done, Usman.
Thanks, Hira. Although I do think I do think there is a place for protests as well.
No, there definitely is.
Yeah,
but the topic that you're dealing with, I wouldn't recommend.
Right. Fair enough. That's true.
So do we have any other questions, or should we say our goodbyes? I think so. Osman, thank you so much. I had a lovely time talking one-on-one. We've had discussions apart from being online as well, but this has been absolutely wonderful. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for hosting this, and I appreciated the rapid fire false questions as well. Thanks so much.
Definitely. Thank you.